Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation today. My name is Ntombi Mahlaule. I'm working for Africa Tikkun as a subject matter expert. And we have our panelists today who are going to help us to unpack the topic that we have today. As we all know, that gender-based violence has long been one of the challenges that South Africa has been facing. And our topic will be focusing on the economic and social and human cost to gender-based violence. So now I'm going to ask all our panelists to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Bafana Khumalo. Just briefly introduce yourself to the viewers.
Good morning. My name is Bafana Khumalo and I'm with Sonke Gender Justice. Sonke Gender Justice works on issues of human rights, gender equality, and HIV. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bafana. Then ask Mr. Mbuyiseni Botha to introduce himself.
Hello, good morning. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, the name is Mbuyiselo. The name is Mbuyiselo Botha. I work for the Commission for Gender Equality, a Chapter 9 institution. Our role is to do three things. If you like, it is it's to educate, litigation, and research. We do these both in the private and public, sectors. So that's what we, as a Commission for Gender Equality, do throughout the 9 provinces. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mbuyiselo. I will ask Azania Sengwayo to introduce herself.
Morning, everyone. My name is Azania Sengwayo. I am an LGBTI activist. I'm also a Pan-Africanist and a Black radical feminist. I'm currently working for Pan-Africa ILGA, which is an association for LGBTI people around Africa.
Thank you so much. The next panelist that we have on the list is Sivuyile. Can you please introduce yourself? Sivuyile, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm an actor, comedian, TV presenter, and producer and content creator who's involved in the issue that we're talking about in creating content so the everyday man can actually understand and learn about all the processes. So I'm here to learn, I'm here to engage, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. And the last one on our list is Neo Belinda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Neo Belinda. I work for Africa Tikkun, and I am an activist. Africa Tikkun works with young people from cradle to career. So from 1 year to 35 years old, trying to build their resilience and also to get them into the economy, to contribute to the economy of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much all to our panelists. And we are going to request Neo now to set a stage for us and give us a short presentation on the topic for today. And from there, we're going to open for our panelists to give inputs for 5 minutes, just on Neo's presentation. And from there, we'll then take questions from our viewers. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ntombi. And again, thank you for affording me the opportunity to be part of this important conversation that is needed in the country today. So many conversations are taking place already, and we need to keep them coming because we need to actually find ways of solving the problems or actually stopping the scourge of violence that is in the country. The cost incurred in responding to gender-based violence is so huge. in the country, that to individuals, the state, and everyone, that we need to have these conversations and see how to better channel resources or better address the problem, preventing them rather than responding to them. It is also important to have this conversation so that we can highlight the challenges that survivors go through throughout their life once they've actually faced abuse or have actually experienced abuse. I will just share my screen now. I just have a one page. Before preparing my presentation, I actually thought of how to do it so that I can better articulate myself. And so the strategy that I used was to get a story of one survivor that I've worked with. I've worked with many survivors before, but I want to actually take this conversation using a true story of someone that has a face that we can actually relate to. I asked her permission to use her story, but I will not be sharing her name. So I titled my presentation, "The Cost Incurred in Response to Gender-Based Violence," so that we can actually map this out and see it. I tried to come up with this diagram. I hope you follow me through and see what I'm trying to portray. So you have gender-based violence, there is the perpetrator and the survivor. And the cost, when we talk about the cost most of the time, many people think that the cost is only incurred by dealing with the survivor, but the perpetrator also, there's a lot of money spent on actually the perpetrator. So when violence happens, in the case of Busisiwe, who was gang raped, who is the survivor in this story that I'm about to share, Busisiwe was gang raped by 7 men in Tembisa, and 7 young people. I think the youngest was 19 years old. And once she was gang raped, she had to then, not in any order, I'm just gonna put the different departments that are involved immediately a case like this happens, so that we can really get to understand. So it's not in any chronological order, but just follow the story with me. So Busisiwe had to go to the Department of Police to report the case at a police station. So immediately the Department of Police is involved in this case, working with the survivor and the perpetrator. So a case is open and investigations start taking place. The police officers need to testify in court. Time is spent, transport is spent going to court. Whether they are effective or not is another question. So, but that is what happens, and resources are really spent on that. Then you have the Department of Social Development. In Busisiwe's case, the case was opened in the Tembisa police station. You have the Department of Social Development that will sometimes provide the psychosocial support, or maybe actually fund a shelter that is going to host the survivor if the survivor goes to a shelter, because not every survivor goes to the shelter. So money is spent in this case also, making sure that the shelter is paid for, food and other services that are needed in the shelters are paid for. Then you have the Department of Justice. We are still talking about Busisiwe's case. So the Department of Justice is in. Now, Department of Justice, what happens? Every day they have to go to court, every time. Busisiwe's case took 5 years. And she was a bit lucky in the sense that she had people that were advocating and actually there to push for her case to go through. So 5 years is really like, it's not, some people, it takes more than 10 years before they actually get a verdict. So the Department of Justice, Busisiwe's case started in Tembisa. It was thrown out of court after a year in Tembisa. All the resources that were actually used there, you can imagine. The case was then sent to the Weinberg court in in Alexandra. There at Alexandra, it took almost 2 years or 3 years for the case to be heard. And then one morning when we went to court, they told us that the person representing the 7 perpetrators was actually not a registered lawyer and so could not actually be there. Imagine how many cases actually get thrown out of the court because of that reason. And then from there, the case was taken to the High Court because immediately the NGO that was supporting Busisiwe at the time, which was Power, had to take the case to High Court. I remember as one of the organizers, we had to actually get taxis immediately to take all the supporters that were out of the court for us to go at the High Court to stage a protest outside so that they can hear the case at the High Court. And actually that happened, and only after 5 years did they get a verdict. So imagine the resources that were being spent during that period. Again, the Department of Health, Busisiwe had to go to the hospital, went to the Tembisa Hospital. She was asked to go to Johannesburg Hospital. She went to Johannesburg Hospital. She was sent to another hospital. Before the hospital sent her back to Johannesburg Hospital. To date, Busisiwe has had 7 operations. Her bladder has actually been reduced, and she's expecting now, like this, she's on a list to go in for the 6th operation because of the gang rape that took place. Doctors are telling Busisiwe that she cannot actually, the 6th operation is risky because the flesh is weak and they don't know how to do it. But because of the coronavirus, she has been put on hold and she lives in pain. Again, the Department of Corrections, a lot of money spent, the Department of Health. So just imagine how many surgeries have been conducted on one person and how much it cost. And the Department of Correctional Service then comes in. The perpetrator the seven were arrested. They have to accommodate them. They have to have protection. They have to eat. They have to be driven to court. They have to have bodyguards to get them to court. And all of that costs the state money. That is another department that actually spends money because of because of the gender-based violence that happened there. The Department of Women in Busisiwe's case, I think 2005, I think it wasn't there then, not too sure, but you see that department will also be involved in a case, maybe to provide some sort of support. The NGO, which is Power, that actually was supporting Busisiwe at the time, there was a lot of placards that were made to call the attention of the service providers, the police, the courts, and every other person to take the case seriously. Every time we had to organize for women to picket out of the court, outside the court, it was costing, transport was more than 15,000, 20,000 a day. And you had to feed the women or the people that came to support Busisiwe outside the court. You also had to make sure they had to eat because most people nowadays are on antiretrovirals, so they cannot stand outside the court for the whole day and actually provide support with an empty stomach without being able to take their medication. So it's a cost that is incurred only on this one case. The workplace, be it the perpetrator or the survivor, if they were working, automatically they will lose their job, and hours of work is actually being lost because people take off leave to go to court, and they have to pay for it. The individual, there is trauma, time, money spent going up and down, moving from one hospital to the other, moving from one organization to the other, trying to seek help, looking for lawyers, repeating your story, everyone wanting to know why it happened, how it happened. and you trying not to be blamed and all of those things. Then you have the families also. In the case of Busisiwe, she had her grandfather who was a pensioner. Busisiwe was not working at the time, but the grandfather would take the grant money and make sure that she has money to go to court. The trauma was just too much for the family. But again, that is one case that at least there were supporters outside. You have, for the people that will have faith-based organization, those who go to church, the pastors who have to come in, and every other person. So this is very costly to actually respond to violence. I think if we can make sure that we prevent this violence from happening, we are going to save a lot of money to do different things, channel it to maybe education in the country, or actually build the economy by providing jobs for people, because a lot of money is being spent on this. A 2014 study by KPMG on violence against women actually showed that 24.4 billion, between 24.4 billion and 42.4 billion rands was spent in the year 2012-2013 on gender-based violence. And a lot of money is spent in South Africa, about 1.75 million. No, about 1.75 million people seek healthcare services because of violence in South Africa. I think I will end my presentation there and give the opportunity to the other panelists to input. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Neo. I will then ask our panelists to give 5 minutes input so that we can be able to take questions from our viewers as well. Please, 5 minutes.
Can I go first? Can I go first?
Yes, please.
Well, colleagues, thank you so much, but also to thank Neo for an incisive presentation. But I think where I'm sitting, it's a clear illustration of how the system fails women in our country. So well, when we talk about GBV and the story now that you spoke to, I mean, there are millions of them who don't even get and who don't get to go to court because there is an understandable feeling from survivors that, but the system fails. What's the point? Why would I report? Why would I go to the police station? So I think Neo and colleagues, as we discuss this phenomenon, we must always be mindful that, in fact, if our focus remains only on the survivors, we're going to continue to miss the mark. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we should get to a point where we really even begin to change the narrative that, what about the boys in Tembisa? What's the narrative of men and women in Tembisa? What are we saying to the boys or the girls in Tembisa as we raise them? The point I'm making is that, colleagues, this morning, as we deal with this, it's going to be important to continue to say that girls don't rape themselves. It is us, men, either by our silence or by colluding and by conniving in these sort of rapes and violence that you see in our country. But also I want to say that, colleagues, this morning, there's a phenomenon where when we talk about the economy, and we know that there is evidence that, in fact, violence impacts disproportionately on women. So my proposition this morning is that we must also factor in the issue of corruption in our country. That I mean, now we talk about power. I mean, you have lots of organizations that are focused on working with women that are closing down, mainly because there are no resources. And we know that in this country, we have the the resources are many. I mean, we have the resources, but then the question is, how are they being used? I mean, we as we speak now, I mean, we have in the media, I mean, how leadership in different spheres of government continue to misuse, abuse these resources. So I think it's important, colleagues, that we should never forget to say that these institutions that are servicing women are closing down mainly and primarily because corruption. So the corruption is in fact responsible. So we must always find the linkage that when we talk about corruption, it's just that there is a context, and that context is that it is women who are disproportionately, impacted or adversely impacted by GBV because of how these resources are misused, abused. But secondly, I also think that we should move to a point where all our efforts and the work that you do in your organization is it not about time that the narrative should be moving towards, in fact, not focusing on the survivors, as I said earlier, but to say to a young boy in Pumasbetane or a young boy in Douglasdale that violence against women is not okay, so that we really move away from this narrative that don't walk at night. We say this to girls: don't walk at night, dress properly, appropriately. I don't know what does that mean. But then we say to the boy child in Douglasdale, in Kwatema, and in Santen, we say to them that it is their bodies. You have no control over their bodies. Unless and until we do that, we will continue to see the system failing women throughout the country. So the Neo's presentation for me talks directly to an entrenched normalization of violence, but also a don't care attitude from the duty bearers, those that are supposed to, in fact, give a quality service to women in our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mbuyiselo. I will ask Azania to comment, and it's very important that we get our panelists to comment, but also focusing on what exactly they are specializing on in particular to this topic. It will be very important for us to also get that, and not overlooking all the organizations that are working in South Africa to address the issues of gender-based violence that we are facing. We know that we have a lot of role players. So it's important that when you give your inputs, please let your input focus on what you are doing as in
it's these all these departments that are listed here are departments that we constantly fighting with every day, because most cases of GBV, particularly of hate crime targeted at the LGBTI people, these are the steps that these are the departments that we have to go through first. So the victim or the survivor comes to us first, and then we help them through the process of reporting and making sure that the case goes through for prosecution. But it's hardly ever it's hardly ever the case where cases of hate crime targeted at Black lesbian women, to be exact, are taken forward for prosecution. Mainly because the survivor loses hope in the criminal justice system, or us as activists who are trying to advocate for the case to go forward, or for the particular survivor to get the help that they need. A particular example, which is close to my heart, So in 2015, if a Black lesbian woman in the Vaal area was killed, brutally killed and raped and mutilated. Till this day, no one has been arrested. No one has come forward and said, okay, I saw Pascalina on this day and this is what happened. Nothing has happened. In fact, we feel, even the family feels like the police and the criminal justice system has failed Pasca, because the investigating officer who had the case was on vacation when we were burying Pasca. We had to hunt him down and say, dude, where are you with the case, right? So I think this is particularly a very important issue to talk about, but also it's very important for us to hold these departments accountable. For an example, the Department of Women should be lobbying for women. Queer women, women in general, they should be lobbying and making sure that they put influence on these policies that should be protecting us. Because it doesn't make sense that I report a case, it goes through to court, and when it's supposed to be sentencing, a murderer is given 15 years, of which they serve maybe 5 years. So it's really important for us to hold these all these departments accountable. Even the faith-based organizations, it's high time we hold them accountable for the kind of information that they put out there, because most of the time, homophobia, transphobia, and just the discrimination and the, what do you call this? It's lungo, guys. I mean, apartheid of women, because I'm sorry, I can't find another word, but women being treated the way they are being treated is mostly influenced by religion and cultural practices, and hence our society is reacting differently towards women and Black lesbian women and queer women in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Azania. Mr. Khumalo, we know very well that Sonke Justice has played a role in giving input to the cost that comes with dealing with the issues of gender-based violence, and it will be great to hear from you.
Thank you very much, moderator. Colleagues, I think the study by KPMG is, as far as I'm aware, the only study that gave us a glimpse of what gender-based violence is costing our country. And the study was, in essence, not just looking at just the cost, but also looking at why is it that the issues that Mbuyiselo has raised of the organizations that are doing great work don't have resources to provide the necessary support that is required for survivors of gender-based violence. And so KPMG looked at models of, if we were to be honest with ourselves, the amount of money that goes into what Neo did very well in the introduction, laying out all the cost factors that goes into investigation, social support services, health, police investigating cases of GBV. It's enormous. And so what KPMG brought forward is that we are spending almost between 24 and 40 billion a year on GBV. And this is the year when the study came out, and I'm sure the numbers possibly have increased now. And so the argument was, why are we not focusing on prevention of gender-based violence so that we save these resources that we can then put to good use for programs that will in fact create social cohesion in our country and provide assets for the development of women and young girls to be engaged economically, meaningfully, and have good livelihoods. So I want to suggest this morning, Ntombi, that we need what I call a combination response. Yes, we need to make sure that we push for the criminal justice system, the whole value chain, to do their work and do it well. and also for civil society to continue doing the work that many of the organizations on this platform are doing, focusing on prevention. As we are all aware, the National Strategic Plan, which was signed by the President in March this year, lays out the 6 pillars of a response. And one of the critical pillars for me is pillar number 2, that talks to prevention. I don't think any of us want to pick up the pieces after a woman has been killed or a girl has been raped and thrown in a ditch somewhere. We want to stop these things from happening in the first place. And part of that includes how do we anchor what Mbuyiselo talked about, the changing of the narrative of what it means to be a man in South Africa. And I think we need to contextualize this. I want to give just a few examples because we don't have time. The costs really are not just about what we are spending as the state, whilst we need to consider that with the idea of what saving do we need to do. But I think we also need to factor in the costs that cannot be accounted for. Azania talks about the assault on Black women lesbians. You know, what is the cost for the families, for these young women who lose their lives simply because they present a particular sexual orientation? You know, why would somebody kill somebody simply because they love somebody else? It just boggles the mind. And that's a cost that we can't quantify. We are dealing at the moment at Sonke with a case of a woman in Springs, Guatemala, Ayanda Simelane, who was brutally killed, ostensibly by somebody close to her, stabbed multiple times, thrown in a ditch somewhere. And the case is investigated for 2 years. And the NPA enrolls that case in court, subpoenas witnesses to appear. On the day when the case is supposed to start, the case is withdrawn from court. How much resources have been spent for the 2 years? You can imagine the emotional trauma of the mother, who is one of the witnesses that was called to testify, to be told on the day of when we are supposed to testify that, no, sorry, we made a mistake, the case is withdrawn. Now, who pays for that emotional trauma that Ayanda Simelane's mother is going through, and the other witnesses that have prepared? We all know the case of Cheryl Zondi, with the Omotoso case in PE. A woman who's not only raped by somebody who should know better, a pastor, but she's raped in court by a lawyer who asks her, how many centimeters? You know, how one quantifies the cost of that trauma, re-traumatization of Cheryl Zondi. Or the case of the magistrate in KwaZulu-Natal who let people off because in her own mind, she thinks somebody who carries a bag and does washing cannot rape anybody. You know, and there are many cases that this magistrate has botched that include violence that has been meted by women. Or Lindiwe Matutu, a young woman, aspirant, working very hard at Pick and Pay, and then an old man who's married is attracted to her, sexually harasses her endlessly, and she reports to Pick and Pay. 2 sexual harassment cases are conducted. Up to date, 3 years later, Lindiwe does not have the reports of those cases of her abuse. And these are the figures that we need to factor in. Because when big companies like Pick and Pay treat women like this and get away with it because they've got good lawyers who can go to court and basically on a technicality avoid justice, what does that mean for our country? And these are the issues that, colleagues, that I think we need to contend with as we have this conversation, because this is not just about broad conversations. These are about real people that we are talking about. These are about citizens of this country. These are about people that are violated daily, both by the system, but also by perpetrators. And so I want to suggest that as we look at this issue of cost, which is big, we need to broaden the picture to look at the bigger cost of how much it means for a woman who has to wake up and get to a taxi and think first, what do I wear? Not because how do I want to look and feel, but how do I make sure that I don't get harassed in the taxi, that I'm not exposed to rape because people will think I'm wearing inappropriately, whatever inappropriate means. And these are the issues that we need to look at. And so I want to emphasize, Ntombi, that as I conclude, we need to focus a lot on how we change the narrative about what it means to be a man in South Africa. That manhood is not about control, it's not about power, it's not about making decisions for women and women's bodies. And when we begin to do that and invest in efforts, that is going to bring a new type of understanding of what manhood is about. And we begin to diminish the exposure to toxic masculinities, we will indeed deal with the challenge of gender-based violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Khumalo. The last input will be coming from Sif, and from there we would like to hear from you viewers in terms of your comments, your questions regarding this topic. It's very important that we get inputs across. Thank you.
Well, I think it's pretty incredible. I think everyone has said some very, very incredible and powerful points. But the most amazing and outstanding thing is that these stats and these numbers of how much money is spent, I've never ever thought of. I've never ever thought of, because I've always thought of the price of losing human life. But I think some men only speak in numbers, in the sense to be able to see how it affects society continuously. When I feel like if a woman has lost their life, I think that is just already, one woman is one woman too many. I work with a lot of programs that work with young boys, and we take young boys into different camps. I hold boxing camps for discipline and stuff. And I think the answer to this thing is obviously not blaming women, but actually working with the young boys and starting them very, very early. But I definitely feel like that presentation should be released. People should be able to see how much money is spent by the state to be able to do this. And let's be truthfully honest, those are only the reported stats. Could you imagine how many people are not heard? How much money has been stolen? And we have a government that even steals money to feed people. Can you imagine how much money has been stolen? So for me, I'm actually quite inspired to be able to get what she shared. I would love to be able to get the stats and the numbers to be able to get it out there, because I'm very inspired to get it out there. And I think some men will only actually get up and stand up and be able to go, it affects my pocket, maybe I should make a change. But I think a woman dying should be the change. It should be the point where we say enough is enough. And men keeping quiet is men being part of the problem. And I think it's time that we men become part of the solution. I'm actually blown away, and I'm really inspired to be able to be part of the chat. And I've learned a lot of things from all the different speakers. But a lot of them have said a lot of things that I do want to say.
Thank you so much, Sif. I just want to throw a question to Mr. Botha. I know you're working for a commission of gender equality. We just want to find out, are we doing enough to deal with the issue of prevention of gender-based violence as a country? Are we as much as we're counting the cost now of dealing with when a woman has been raped, when a woman has been abused, but are we doing enough to address the prevention in every corner, in every society, not only in the townships? Or are we reacting when issues are happening? And are we reacting only when issues are happening in the townships, in the suburbs? Are we also doing the same thing when it happens in the rural of Limpopo, in KZN, where people are not known, are not seen in the media? Are we responding only when a university student has been raped, or are we responding to all the issues across in South Africa, in the corners where people are not known? As a commissioner in the Commission of Gender Equality, are we doing enough as a country and as organizations that are working in the space?
Well, thank you so much for the question. I mean, the answer is a resounding no. I mean, 26 years into our democracy, I think it would be a lie for all of us in this meeting to say that we as a country have arrived, we are doing much. No, I want to say that no, we are not doing enough. But I also want to go back to my presentation in response to an insightful presentation by Newo, that look at the commission where I work. If you check of all the Chapter 9 institutions in the country, look at all the budgets: Public Protector, Auditor General, Human Rights Commission, IEC, all of them without fail, the only institution, the only chapter 9 that is least supported with resources is the Commission. But then that begs the question, what does that say about us as a country, how our budgeting? I mean, it also raises the question about, I mean, gender equality. But having have said that, I also want us to go back and look at the Department of Women, Persons with Disabilities, Youth, and also look at, I mean, of all the departments, again, this is the least supported. And then it begs the question, why? And the answer is simple. These are reflections of how, as a country, we regard gender equality. There is this attitude, extremely dismissive. Gender, into abafazi man, into abasadi, awusenzani, hayi man abafazi man, you know. We gave them Beijing, so bafunani yini na. You have, and this happens throughout all the spheres. You're going to hear lots of noise come tomorrow, come the next day, August, that there are these pledges, there are these movements, all of them important, must be applauded. But the question remains, do we put our money where our mouths are? And then, an unequivocal response is to your question, no. And look, unless let me just give an example. How many of us in this meeting know precisely the billions that the president spoke about? Where are they? What are they doing? How are they accounted for? Who is being held accountable? I spoke to you about the closure of different NGOs that focuses on, I mean, working with women, I mean, the shelter movement. How many of us can sit here and look us straight in the eye without blinking an eye and say, look, as a country, our response is in fact in line with our pronouncements. I mean, so I want to say from the Commission for Gender Equality, a lot needs to be done. I mean, I speak with you now. You had asked us to talk about the work we do. In all the 9 provinces, you have in different CGE offices, you have legal officers. Now, ideally, in a society faced with what I call a second pandemic that has been with us for many years, GBV, femicide. I mean, you would expect we have only one in each province. You have one legal officer. I mean, that's a shame. That's a shame in a country that professes to take GBV seriously. I am saying to you that there are these practical, real questions as to when the budget, I mean, if you speak to those who works with our budget and ask them about, and the CGE, about the Department of Women, and ask the question, are they adequately resourced? I think the answer you'll get is that no, they are not. And the question is, for me, is that these are the reflection of how we regard gender, GBV, that we are a ticker box society. That look, we have gone to CSW, we have the Department of Women, we have CGE. We're not going to have a national GBV council. I ask myself sitting here, when you already have institutions that are suffering, that are in fact dealing with resource challenges, you then have another department, or another structure. Now, then the question is, I ask myself sitting here, where are you going to find resources? Why don't you make sure that the rape crisis, that Ilitalabantu, that power, I mean, all of them, that they work well? Why don't you make sure that Sonke does not have to go outside and seek funding? You in the country make sure that you will you'll make it possible that Sonke continues to do its amazing work that it does. So that's my response.
Thank you so much, Mr. Botha. One of the questions that is coming from our viewers is, what makes the cases that we have that has weaknesses and enough evidence to be dropped out of the roll? What is causing that? Can we get also the inputs from one of the panelists in this regard? We have a lot of cases that have been taken out of the roll, or others, nothing is actually happening. NEO has just presented a case takes more than 3 years to be heard. What is the cost, even when you have enough evidence? And are we going to get this right if we continue like that? Mr. Khumalo, can we get an input from you?
I think part of the truth, Ntombi, is that women are expandable generally in a patriarchal society. The failures of the criminal justice system are layered with what I call toxic masculinities. It starts in the police stations, how either police don't take this very seriously, where dockets go missing, or the evidence is lost. And then it gets to lackadaisical response from the prosecution authority. I mean, the case I've referred to of Cheryl Zondi in PE, if all of you remember, it was on TV, when that lawyer was basically assaulting her, the prosecutor sat there quietly, and was watching like he's watching a match at a football ground. Now, the prosecutor is the lawyer of the people. His or her role is to present a case as on behalf of the survivor, so that the judge can make a fair ruling. But when a prosecutor sits there and allows a lawyer to ask irrelevant questions that are actually invading on the dignity of a survivor, where should Cheryl really fall back on? It took the magistrate to intervene to say, no, but you can't ask that kind of a question, and all of that. Now, for me, that's part of the problem, Dombi. We don't have, I think, serious commitment in this country on this issue, because we are in a society that simply does not respect women. And we need to change that narrative. I think the introduction of the National Strategic Plan is seeking to do that. But as we all know, policy, we have a lot of policies in South Africa, very progressive. The detail is the challenges in the implementation. And part of that is because of attitude. I think you can have all the nice policies you want in the world. If you don't have commitment to make sure that these cases are resolved, we will continue to have these problems. You can't explain the case of somebody who gets assaulted and over 2 years and the case is enrolled, witnesses are subpoenaed, and then the NPA discovers on the day of the case that no, actually we don't have a case. How do you even begin to explain that? It can only show that there's so much weaknesses in our system that women's lives are simply, Azania talked about black lesbians that get raped. I mean, tell me one case where there's been a successful prosecution within a period of time. And part of the reason is that because generally in South Africa, we are very homophobic, It's possible that even the police that are supposed to investigate this harbor attitudes that are negative about this. And so they are dragging their feet in reporting, in investigating these cases. And we can't even go to the children, because there are so many cases of children that get abused and the cases get to court and the magistrate says, no, it's the father, he's a good man, they can repair the relationship. How does a child go back to a home where she has been raped by her father, whether biological or stepfather or uncle? And then the magistrates, some of them utter such sentences in their judgments. No, they are very close, he's a good man, he's working, he's professional, they can work these things out. No one takes into account how does this child feel as they see their perpetrator, and now they are forced to go back to that environment where they were violated. So there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of redeeming the stature of the prosecution in this country, the whole value chain of the criminal justice system.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khumalo, for your input. I will just ask Neo to just give a brief on what Africa Tikkun is doing in terms of addressing the issue of prevention. And we know that there are other organizations and role players out there who are doing the same, but how do we then expand a work that we are doing to ensure that it touches every corner in South Africa to address this challenge that we are facing?
Okay, thank you.
Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ntombi, for the question. At Africa Tikkun, we work with young people from the ages of 1 to 35. And we have 2 groups, the Young Urban Women Program and the Young Urban Men's Program. And these spaces are created for young people to sit and discuss issues that they are facing, have the opportunity to talk to themselves, get other people, role players, from the communities to come in and talk to them and get them to explore possible preventative methods, get them to know how to handle the issues and not to react in a violent way, but also to give them the opportunity to ask relevant questions to both the young men and the young women. What is the society that they want to see? What kind of society do they want to grow in? And what is it that you should do to make sure that it happens? Because we need to engage young people at this early age. Socialization is the biggest, is one thing that causes gender-based violence. So if we can actually try and socialize our young people differently to look and respect each other the same way, whether you are a boy or a girl, a male or a female, and to say we have equal rights, we have equal opportunities, we should actually support each other to grow in this world, in the communities that we live in, then we will actually be able one day to change the narrative and not actually get a society that is still so violent and patriarchal. Those sessions are held every Wednesday, where the young men actually, we started with the young urban women, and the young men came up and said, we want the same group for us. And that was very important. One question I asked them is, why should I spend time working with you? Because I wanted them to take responsibility. One of them said to me that, Ma'am Neo, we know that men are trash, but trash is recyclable. So for us to move forward, we need to work together. And we are at this stage where we want to take leadership to build another narrative about young men out there. So that is how Africa Tikkun is working with young men and young women to make sure that the society is one day free of violence, that they become responsible parents, not absent fathers, that they become parents that are able to sit and talk issues rather than use power and control to fight the problems that they have, and actually to make sure that when they see violence happening, they have the responsibility to report or actually stop it, because they look at their peers and they tell them, they usually say that slogan, the slogans that they use at school or when a girl is passing, if someone does it, you should be able to call them to order immediately. Because if it doesn't sound good, you need to tell them right there that it's not okay for you to do that. But again, Africa Tikkun as an organization makes sure that they provide gender sensitizations training for their staff members to be able to connect and work with the communities, the members of the communities and the parents of the children that are the organization works with. So these sessions actually help give the staff of the organization the opportunity to deal with their own issues so that they are able to help the community properly. I think I will end it there.
Thank you so much, Neo. Just to wrap up, I'm going to ask Steve to just give the last input, but we don't want to make this as another talk show. How do we then take this mandate forward and get commitment from our role players, our leaders, to ensure that there is prevention that is happening across the country?
Can I go first?
Yes. Oh, Steve, can you sit first because we're running out of time, and then you'll follow Commissioner, just to wrap up. Steve, please unmute yourself. Please unmute, Steve.
You know, for me, it's been quite a pleasure to listen to everyone speak, but I think sometimes we give the government too much credit. I think they're definitely incompetent and they do not care. And for me, what gets me, that upsets me the most is, where are we drawing the line? If this is not the line, where is the line? What do we have to do for them to really pay attention and really care? I really feel like it's good. Like, I've listened to everyone speak, and I think to some points I feel we give them too much we give them too much credit. Like, we think they're making mistakes on purpose. These guys are incompetent and they do not care. All they care is about themselves. And how can we, as people of South Africa, stand up and say, enough is enough? You need to listen to us. You can see the marches aren't working. You can see the tweets aren't working. The social media isn't working. We need to be heard. If it's every single woman in the country not going to work and saying, if you are not treating us like humans, then we will not be in society. Like, I've seen societies do that in other countries. Enough is enough, and we need to take a stand, and men need to be there and be involved and hands-on. It's just ridiculous. Like, it gets me angry every time I listen to these things, but we need to get to a point of going, what can we do? Because continuously we speak about the stats, we speak about the money, we speak about what's happening out there, but no one's doing anything, and people are getting killed. I promise you, in South Africa, animals die with more dignity than women. It's ridiculous. And we all have to come together and strategize, how can we get the attention of the government? Because they've treated this COVID as this huge epidemic. But I promise you, women are dying left, right, and center. But COVID is still killing people, but women are dying faster. And it's absolutely absurd. And we need to be able to make sure that they listen to us, and they don't listen to us, something's going to happen, and we're going to shut down this flipping country. Enough is enough.
Thank you so much, Steve. Commissioner, you can just wrap up just for a second, and so that we can then wrap up for today. We know we've given you, it's not enough to say everything, but we believe that we will have this conversation, this dialogue again, because I can see the viewers are requesting that we have a dialogue on these issues again.
Well, I think that from the Commission for Gender Equality, it's important that there's support, and we use these institutions, that we strengthen them, but other than strengthen them, but we also call for a lot of support and material resources so that they're strengthened, because they can be as good as we want them to be, and mainly by using them, but ensuring that they are strengthened. And there's no better way in strengthening them without using them, but also agitating for them to be resourced better and qualitatively. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say something, don't be sorry for that. We are always shocked when a woman has been raped or abused. When is it that we are going to shock the abusers or the potential abusers? We need to change this narrative. The perpetrators should be shocked so that they actually know that this is not okay. The president said gender-based violence is now a pandemic. It has been a pandemic forever. We've been saying these since 2003 that I started working on these issues. We've been saying this thing is a pandemic, and no one is actually treating it as a pandemic. What I'm saying is, how they treat it a pandemic is everyone around the world, if you look at the COVID, everyone is actually looking for a vaccine to prevent it. So now that the president has said gender-based violence is a pandemic, what is the vaccine for it? So we need to find a vaccine now to stop it? Can we put the same resources to make sure we stop this from happening? Because there are two pandemics. There are millions, billions, and they're looking for loans to actually stop this pandemic of COVID-19. Can they look for something to stop this pandemic of gender-based violence?
Ntombi, just one bit. I know you want to close. I like what Neo said and Commissioner, but Steve has raised an issue that is of concern to me. Whilst I agree with him that we need to push back against government, I don't think that responsibility should just be on women. Women have been carrying this burden for ages. What this intervention requires is us men to stand up and say enough is enough. I think we are continuously placing an unfair burden on women who have to look beyond their shoulders every day about their safety. And once more, they must be the ones who fight to stop this scourge that is happening on them. I think
I totally agree with
I
that.
want to just amend what Steve said by saying, let us join the efforts that women have been doing, that have been marching in the streets, that have been, challenging the system. What is missing there is the voices of men. We need more men to come to this space. We need more men to speak out. We need to disrupt what is happening in our society. We also need to self-reflect, by the way, because it's easy sometimes to go and march and go back and kick your girlfriend at home. So we need a consistency so that what we say in public is also what we do in our private space. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Mr.
Mr.
Khumalo, I totally agree with Mr. Khumalo. The thing for me, I know we want to go, but for me, what I think is definitely, I want everyone to work together, but I definitely feel like the thing that I meant about women not going to work is more of like I don't know how English is leaving me now, but like it's more of they don't care about women now. They don't care about them, but they need to be able to see the power that women hold in society and that women are needed in society. I'm not saying that it's just a woman's fight, but I think symbolically, if every woman said, I'm not going to work, then it's a symbolic thing. But definitely men need to be involved and we need to be there because we are causing the trouble. But this conversation can go on forever, but I'm really, really inspired by everything that's been said.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think as we're wrapping up, we just need a commitment. We need to take action. We need to do something about this issue. Like I said in the beginning, this is not going to be another talk show. This conversation is going to continue, and it's going to continue beyond this session that we are having today. We want to get as much inputs as we can get. Please send those inputs to our Facebook, send those inputs in to Africa Tikkun so that we can carry this conversation forward. And it's good that we have the commissioner in our midst. So we need to get all the role players on board so that we can get commitment to ensure that we address this pandemic that we are facing of gender-based violence against women. And we need all partners, all parties on board. Thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers. Thank you for participating. Thank you to our panelists. You have done a very great job. So we'll send you the next invitation because this is not, like I said, a talk show. This is very serious. So we need to take action, and the action is now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ntombi. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.